You're listening to From Stillness, an audiobook for a mind in need of quiet. Most of the problems we carry through life don't actually come from the outside world. They don't stem from a lack of ability, a tough past, or unfair circumstances. What they come from, quietly and almost invisibly, is our deep fear of being disliked. The moment we start measuring our worth through the eyes of others, we begin to lose our grip on peace. It starts young, when we're rewarded for being agreeable or scolded for being too different. From there, a pattern begins. We seek approval like it's oxygen. We shape our choices around what will keep us accepted. And without realizing it, we stop living for ourselves and start performing for the world around us. But there's something radical hidden in this truth. Real freedom, the kind that brings lightness to your soul, often means being disliked. Not because you're hostile or careless, but because you've stopped bending to every expectation placed upon you. When you base your life on avoiding disapproval, you slowly disappear. Every action becomes calculated, every word filtered, every decision diluted. And over time, that tension turns into anxiety, frustration, and a constant sense of never quite feeling right. So what's the way out? It's not about shutting down or becoming indifferent. It's about building the quiet, inner courage to be who you are, even if it's not met with applause. Because if happiness depends on universal approval, it's not happiness, it's slavery. The truth is, not everyone will like you. But that's not a sign of failure. It's often the first real sign of freedom. When you stop performing and start living, when you stop chasing validation and start choosing honesty, that's when life begins to feel like yours again. We grow up believing that happiness comes with praise, that being seen as a good person, a successful person, a likable person, is the key to a fulfilling life. So we chase approval, from parents, from teachers, from society, like it's the final destination. And for a while it works. The compliments feel good. The likes, the recognition, the "you're doing great" comments, they keep us going. But over time, something starts to feel hollow. Because the more we shape ourselves to meet the expectations of others, the more disconnected we become from our own sense of meaning. We start confusing being liked with being happy. But there's a fundamental truth hiding behind this confusion. Happiness doesn't come from being recognized. It comes from the quiet courage to live in alignment with who you really are. That courage is rare because it asks you to let go of needing approval. It asks you to accept that some people won't understand you, won't celebrate you, and may even judge you. And it asks you to keep living your truth anyway. That's what true freedom looks like. It's not loud. It's not rebellious. It's simply choosing to walk your own path even when no one's clapping for you. It's the moment you stop asking, "Will they like me if I do this?" and start asking, "Will I respect myself if I don't?" Because the price of constantly seeking approval is your authenticity. And once you trade that away, no amount of praise can fill the space that's left behind. The authors of The Courage to be Disliked remind us that the courage to be happy and the courage to be disliked are the same thing. You can't have one without risking the other. Real happiness isn't about performing well for the world. It's about living well for yourself, not in selfishness, but in sincerity. When you show up without apology, when you stop filtering yourself to earn validation, that's when your relationships become lighter, your choices become clearer, and your life becomes yours again. Because at the end of the day, happiness doesn't come from being approved of. It comes from being aligned with your values, your truth, and your own quiet sense of freedom. We've been taught to believe that our past shapes us, that who we are today is the direct result of what we've been through. If we're anxious, it's because something went wrong in childhood. If we're angry, it's because of past wounds. If we're stuck, it must be because of the way we were raised, or the traumas we carry. And while the past may influence us, the real question is, does it define us? According to The Courage to be Disliked, the answer is no. Not even close. The past isn't your destiny, it's just your story so far. And stories can be rewritten. You are not determined by what happened to you. You are shaped by what you decide to do next. What the authors challenge us to see is that we often use the past not as a map, but as a justification. I can't change because I've been hurt. I can't grow because this is who I've always been. But what if that's not the truth? Just the most convenient excuse. In reality, change is always available. What stops us isn't the weight of our memories, but the fear of what change might demand. Growth requires letting go of the safety net of blame. It asks us to stop pointing backwards and start stepping forward. That's uncomfortable. It means acknowledging that we're no longer waiting for a better childhood, or different parents, or a world that finally understands us. We're standing in the present, and we're the ones holding the steering wheel. It's not to say your pain doesn't matter. It does. But pain doesn't get the final word. The meaning you give it does. As the book says, it's not the experience that defines us. It's what we decide that experience means. And that meaning is entirely yours to choose. So if you've been waiting for the past to let you go, here's the truth. It already has. The only thing left is for you to let go of it. Most of us believe that emotions happen to us. That fear, sadness, or anxiety arrive uninvited as natural responses to external situations. We think, I'm nervous because the interview is scary, or I'm angry because someone wronged me. But what if it's the other way around? What if emotions don't just arise from events, but are actually created, chosen, even, to serve something deeper? That's the radical idea at the heart of the courage to be disliked. The authors propose that our emotions are not fixed reactions. They're tools we use to achieve goals, often without realizing it. For example, imagine someone who says they desperately want a new job, but every time an interview comes up, they're overwhelmed by anxiety and back out. On the surface, it looks like fear is blocking their dream. But if we go deeper, we might find that the real goal isn't to get the job, it's to avoid the risk of failure. In that case, the fear isn't the obstacle, it's the strategy. It's doing exactly what it was subconsciously designed to do, keep them from facing rejection. That's a confronting realization because it turns responsibility back onto us. It suggests that we're not victims of emotion, we're participants in creating them. And that means we can no longer say, I can't help how I feel. Instead, we have to ask, what purpose is this feeling serving? What am I trying to avoid or achieve through it? This isn't about blaming ourselves for feeling afraid or sad or angry. It's about recognizing the hidden intelligence in our emotional patterns. Every feeling has a function. And when we become aware of the goal behind the feeling, we unlock the power to change it. We can decide whether that goal still serves us or if it's time to choose another one. Because maybe the fear isn't protecting us anymore. Maybe it's just keeping us small. And maybe, just maybe, we're strong enough now to want something bigger. It sounds strange at first, the idea that anyone would choose unhappiness. Who would willingly live in frustration, anxiety, or sorrow? But if you look closely, you'll start to see a pattern. Unhappiness isn't always an accident. Sometimes it's a strategy, a way of protecting ourselves from effort, from failure, from vulnerability. In The Courage to be Disliked, Kishimi and Koga offer a bold insight. People don't cling to unhappiness because they enjoy suffering. They cling to it because it serves a hidden purpose. When someone constantly feels defeated, helpless, or unworthy, we often assume life has just been unfair to them. And sometimes that's true, but other times those emotional states become habits because they create a kind of safety. If you believe you're broken, for instance, then you don't have to try. You don't have to risk failing. You don't have to show up fully and risk rejection. Unhappiness becomes a shield. It justifies inaction. It creates a story where you are not responsible for change because you are stuck. This doesn't mean people are lying about their pain. The pain is real. But the deeper question is, what does the pain allow them to avoid? For some, it's responsibility. For others, it's discomfort. And for many, it's the fear of real transformation, because change always demands courage. Understanding this isn't about blame. It's about liberation. Because if unhappiness is a choice, even a subconscious one, that means happiness can be a choice too. It means we're not doomed to repeat the same patterns. We're simply invited to question them, to ask, what purpose is my suffering serving? And if that purpose no longer fits the person we want to become, then maybe it's time to choose differently. We all want to be seen, to be valued, to feel like we matter. And for most of us, this desire quietly turns into something deeper, a craving for recognition. We begin to measure our worth not by how we feel about ourselves, but by how others react to us. Were we praised? Were we accepted? Did we meet their expectations? At first, it seems harmless. Approval feels good. Compliments land like little bursts of meaning. But over time, this need for validation becomes a trap. Because the moment our happiness depends on being seen as good in someone else's eyes, we surrender our freedom. That's the painful truth. The courage to be disliked lays bare. When recognition becomes your goal, you're no longer living for yourself, you're living through other people's filters. And those filters constantly shift. What pleases one person disappoints another. What earns applause today might draw criticism tomorrow. And suddenly, you're stuck, exhausted by the effort to please everyone and terrified of being seen as less than perfect. Even worse, when you start defining yourself through external approval, you lose touch with your own values. You say yes when you want to say no. You overextend, you shapeshift. And all of it is in service of being liked, of never rocking the boat, of never giving someone a reason to turn away. But here's the irony. The more you chase approval, the more fragile your sense of self becomes. Because now, your worth isn't rooted inside you. It's scattered across the opinions of others, and you have no control over that. And still, we keep chasing it. Because we're afraid of what it might mean if someone disapproves. But freedom, real, lasting peace, begins the moment we let go of the need to be universally liked. Not everyone will agree with who you are. Not everyone will understand you. And that's okay. Because the alternative is living someone else's life, on someone else's terms. And that isn't living at all. When your self-worth is tied to being seen a certain way, smart, talented, successful, admired, it doesn't take long before life starts to feel like a competition. You begin to measure yourself not against who you were yesterday, but against everyone around you. Who's doing better? Who's more liked? Who's winning the game you think you're supposed to be playing? Slowly, almost without noticing, your world turns into a scoreboard. And every time someone else shines, you feel a little dimmer. Kishimi and Koga describe this as a core reason people struggle to form genuine relationships. When recognition becomes a goal, others aren't allies, they're threats. Someone else's success becomes proof of your failure, their praise, your silence, their progress, your stagnation. Even when you care about them, a small part of you flinches when they win. Not because you're cruel, but because you've been taught that life is zero-sum, that only one of you gets to be enough. This kind of mindset doesn't just cause unhappiness, it causes isolation. Because when you view others as rivals, you can't fully connect with them. You might smile, cheer them on, but there's distance underneath it. And that distance grows until one day, you realize you're surrounded by people, but you still feel completely alone. The truth is, there's no peace in a life built on comparison. There's only pressure, and worse, it's pressure you can never escape, because there will always be someone doing more, achieving faster, or being admired louder. But when you let go of that need to win, everything changes. You stop measuring your worth against others and start rooting for them instead. You find joy in their joy. And in doing so, you make space for something competition can never offer, real connection. At some point in life, most of us are taught a quiet rule. If you give, you should get. If you're kind, you should be appreciated. If you sacrifice, you should be rewarded. And while that might seem fair, it's also the beginning of a mindset that quietly poisons even the most meaningful relationships. Because the moment your kindness becomes transactional, it stops being real. It becomes a silent contract, one the other person never agreed to. Kishimi and Koga explore this dynamic with striking clarity. They explain that when we give with an expectation of return, a thank you, a favor, a gesture of equal effort, we aren't really offering love. We're bartering. We're setting ourselves up for disappointment, resentment, and emotional imbalance. And when that expectation isn't met, we feel betrayed. I would have done it for you, we think. Why won't you do it for me? But here's the truth. Genuine relationships aren't built on fairness. They're built on freedom. The freedom to give without pressure, to support without obligation, and to love without needing to be loved back in exactly the same way. When we expect people to respond how we would, we turn connection into control. We impose our values, our pace, our emotional logic onto someone else. And that never leads to peace. It leads to distance. The shift, then, is this. Instead of asking, "What will I get back?" ask, "Who do I want to be in this moment?" Give because it reflects who you are, not because it buys you something later. Let people surprise you. Let them respond, or not, and love them anyway. Because when your generosity is no longer a disguised demand, it becomes something far more powerful. It becomes real. And in that space, relationships can finally breathe. We spend so much of our lives chasing happiness, as if it's something waiting out there, in achievements, in recognition, in someone else's approval. But what if the deepest kind of happiness doesn't come from being admired, or even being loved, but from knowing deep down that we are of use, that we matter? Not in some grand, heroic way, just in the quiet sense that someone's world is a little better because we're in it. Kashimi and Koga call this a sense of contribution, the feeling that your presence, your actions, your existence are beneficial to others. And it's surprisingly powerful, because once you believe that your life is meaningful to someone else, you stop needing constant reassurance. You stop chasing likes, praise, and validation. You already know you're enough because you're contributing. Even if no one says thank you, even if no one notices, you know. This mindset shift frees you. Instead of asking, "Do they like me?" you start asking, "How can I be useful here?" It transforms relationships from competition into connection. It makes daily life feel purposeful. And perhaps most importantly, it gives you a reason to keep showing up, even when things are hard. Because contribution isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. The beauty of this idea is that contribution can take any form. It doesn't have to be big or public. Listening to a friend, making someone laugh, showing up consistently for your family, your craft, your community. These are quiet contributions, and they matter more than you think. When you realize that happiness isn't about what you get, but about what you give, something unlocks. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's opinions. You're grounded in your own quiet sense of value, and that, truly, is what lasting happiness feels like. We grow up with a quiet myth running through our minds, that one day, if we just try hard enough, achieve enough, or become impressive enough, we'll finally arrive. At peace. At happiness. At the version of ourselves we've been chasing for years. So we sprint through life, eyes fixed on the next milestone, the perfect job, the dream relationship, the external proof that we made it. But when we get there, something unexpected happens. The satisfaction doesn't last. The joy is brief. And very quickly, a new goal appears on the horizon. The finish line moves. That's because happiness was never waiting at the top of the mountain. It was always hidden in the climb, in the process, not the prize. The courage to be disliked reminds us that meaning isn't something you arrive at. It's something you create, moment by moment, in how you show up to your own life. And when you start paying attention to the step you're on instead of obsessing over the destination, something changes. The pressure to be exceptional softens. The shame of not being there yet fades. And the present moment, the only place life actually exists, begins to feel like enough. This doesn't mean you stop growing or dreaming. It means you stop postponing your sense of worth until those dreams come true. You can still build, still aim high, still want more. But you learn to measure progress not just by results, but by alignment. Did you live today in a way that felt true? Did you act with intention, with integrity, with presence? If the answer is yes, even just a little, then you're already walking the path of a meaningful life. Because real happiness isn't a place you get to. It's the quiet confidence that your life, as it is, already holds value. Not someday, not once you've earned it, but now. In the effort, in the process, in the beautifully imperfect act of becoming. There's a quiet trap that many smart kids fall into, and they don't realize it until years later, when life feels small, disconnected, and strangely fragile. It begins with praise. You're told you're clever, quick, ahead of the curve. You learn that being right, being impressive, gets you love, and so you build an identity around it. You become the smart one. But what nobody tells you is that once your self-worth is built on being effortlessly good, the moment something feels hard, it feels like failure. Instead of leaning into challenge, you avoid it. You only try what you already know you're good at. You don't raise your hand unless you're sure of the answer. You step back from new things, not because you're lazy, but because deep down you're afraid of being exposed, of not living up to the image you've spent years maintaining. And slowly, life starts to shrink. You do less. You risk less. And without realizing it, you begin to feel more alone. Socially, you might observe more than you participate. You analyze connection instead of experiencing it. You become skilled at reading people, but less skilled at letting them truly see you. And eventually, you tell yourself a new story, that you're different, that you're just not like them, that no one really gets you. But underneath that distance is loneliness. The way out of this trap isn't becoming smarter, it's becoming braver. It's letting go of the image and choosing growth over perfection. It's embracing awkwardness, effort, and vulnerability. You stop trying to win every time, and you start showing up, even when it's messy. Because being human isn't about being exceptional, it's about being real. And when you can finally let go of needing to be the smartest person in the room, you finally learn how to belong in it. There comes a moment, sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, when you realize that the identity you've clung to for years no longer fits. For many of us, that identity is the smart one, the gifted kid, the one who always had the answers, who made things look easy, who carried silent pressure like a badge of honor. But over time, what once made you proud becomes a prison, because now you're not just trying to live, you're trying to keep up the image. And every misstep, every hesitation, every moment of not knowing feels like failure, not of the task, but of who you are. This is the silent cost of over-identifying with intelligence. You don't allow yourself to start at the beginning. You fear looking slow, unsure, or, God forbid, average. So you stay still. You wait until you're certain. You only enter spaces where you feel competent. And little by little, your life shrinks down to what's comfortable, predictable, safe, but never alive. To step out of this shadow is to do something radically different. To begin again, not as the smart kid, but as a human being who's willing to grow. That means being seen trying, not impressing. It means asking questions, not having answers. It means learning to say, I don't know, but I want to find out. It means choosing curiosity over control, humility over pride, action over perfection. Growth doesn't ask you to abandon your intelligence. It asks you to anchor it in courage, the courage to show up uncertain, to do something badly, to look foolish, and to realize in doing so that none of it takes anything away from your worth. Because who you are is not defined by your mental sharpness, it's revealed in your willingness to live fully, even when it's messy. This is the turning point. Not from weakness to strength, but from image to authenticity. From living as someone you think you're supposed to becoming someone real, someone present, someone free. If there's one truth that echoes through every lesson we've explored, it's this. You don't need to become someone else to be worthy. You only need the courage to be fully yourself. That sounds simple, but in a world where approval is currency and perfection is rewarded, being real is often the hardest thing. We were taught to chase recognition, to protect an image, to avoid discomfort at all costs. But that pursuit slowly erodes who we really are. The message of the courage to be disliked and the journey beyond the smart kid identity share one root truth. Happiness is not something others can give you. It's something you must choose, build, and protect from within. And to do that, you have to let go of control. Let go of being impressive. Let go of needing everyone to like you. Because freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you stop living by other people's expectations. So what now? You start small. You notice when you're shrinking yourself to fit in. You take the uncomfortable action instead of waiting for certainty. You shift your focus from being seen as good to doing what feels meaningful. And above all, you remind yourself, daily, gently, fiercely, that your value was never up for debate. You are allowed to be unsure. You are allowed to grow slowly. You are allowed to live a life that is honest, even if it isn't perfect. Because in the end, it's not about being admired from a distance. It's about being connected, alive, and deeply, unapologetically human.